TIZNOW is the greatest experience of my now 40-plus year training career.
He's definitely in the top 5 of that, giving you that feeling of power.
It was a mystery to everybody around him.
I got the same kind of feeling from Ali Shiva, from John Henry, in Precisionist.
You might think you knew what he was going to do, but you never really did.
Even if he hadn't been as good a racehorse as he was, it would have been a great experience just to have been around him.
In the autumn of 2000, trainer Jay Robbins found himself on the backstretch of Churchill Downs with his ever-developing 3-year-old colt, TIZNOW. TIZNOW's owners, Michael Cooper and Cecilia Straub Rubens, plunked down a $360,000 supplemental fee to run in the $4 million Breeders' Cup Classic.
The supplemental fee wasn't an issue for my mom, because as far as she was concerned, he'd earned it.
The most amazing thing about TIZNOW's 3-year-old season was he didn't break his maiden until late May.
As they come inside the final furlong, it's TIZNOW. He is in the clear by 4 or 5.
And for him to go on and break his maiden in May, win a stake in his next start.
And TIZNOW trying to spring the upset, and he's done it.
Well, that got us fired up, so you typically don't go from a maiden to a grade 3, but yeah.
We want to get this one. I just hope we're not expecting too much of them too soon.
But the swaps would prove to be too much.
Captain Steve just shrugged off TIZNOW, and it's time to salute the captain.
Seasons change, and so do horses. For TIZNOW, it happened at Del Mar.
We shipped to Del Mar, and he blossomed physically. I've rarely seen a horse change so much physically as he did. He really became a man.
In just his 6th start, TIZNOW would take on older horses in the $1 million Pacific Classic. TIZNOW would also be without jockey Victor Espinoza, who instead decided to ride Bob Baffert's River Keen.
So here we are without a jock, and I'm talking to Jay about it, and I said, let's try Garrett Gomez. But Garrett was going through a lot of issues at the time, and he said, well, what do you want? He said, well, we should try McCarran.
I was thrilled to be given the opportunity to ride him in the Pacific Classic.
But Kent Soma pulling the marbles, Chris McCarran will pull the horse's name. TIZNOW draws 4. Got the 3-year-old in there, but seems to be doing extremely well. What kind of a chance do you give him?
He's training very well down here this summer. Of course, it remains to be seen if he's competitive with these older horses.
TIZNOW has now gone in. Gates closed for the $1 million Pacific Classic, and away they go.
Skimming was galloping along in the lead up there with Garrett on his back, and I got to about his tail at the 5/16 pole, and I shook the stick at TIZNOW, and he pinned his ears, and he kind of ducked in a little bit, kind of telling me, no, don't do that.
They come to the quarter pole in the Pacific Classic, and it's skimming them, telling you gotta come and catch me, you wanna win it.
I just went to hand riding him, and Skimming started to inch away a little bit.
And Skimming is finding more. TIZNOW also battling away.
So I put the stick in my left hand, and I shook it at him, and I just tapped him with it, and he accelerated a little bit. And so he kept on running to finish well, only to be second.
TIZNOW is making inches, but in plain English, Skimming did not give them a chance today.
It was decided to try to win a grade 1 with him, so we took him back to Louisiana Downs, and he was really magnificent there.
He was a horse that was a little bit more comfortable when he was like free running. You know, he didn't really want to be held hard and restrained hard.
And they're off in Super Derby 21.
He broke very alertly, went to the lead, and I just gave him his head, and he pricked his ears. He was just going around the first turn like this.
TIZNOW came away beautifully as well. In fact, TIZNOW takes the lead as they pass the stands for the first time.
That was visually the most impressive race he ever ran in his life.
And Pat Day gets a hold of Commendable, and he gets up on even terms now with TIZNOW.
Jay's going, nobody's ever won this race after leading for a mile. I said, hold on, baby, he's still running.
TIZNOW is traveling very nicely, though, and he starts to inch clear from Commendable.
TIZNOW is just rocking along very, very comfortably. And I just let him stay that way until the head of the lane.
He went out there and he floated across that racetrack.
And it's TIZNOW running powerfully.
I chirped to him. I threw a cross on him and asked him to run with my hands, and he just dropped and sailed out.
A superstar in the making. TIZNOW strolling home to win the Super Derby by 6.
Oh, it was awesome. I mean, I still get goosebumps thinking about that day.
We started thinking about Breeders' Cup after the Super Derby.
But first, TIZNOW would head back to Santa Anita for a rematch against Captain Steve in the Goodwood Breeders' Cup Handicap.
And away they go to a perfect start.
I actually thought we'd beat Captain Steve fairly comfortably because we were really good right then.
TIZNOW and Chris McCarron down at the rail. Captain Steve and Victor Espinosa stride for stride with a 16th to go.
They went the whole way, bang, 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 all the way to the finish line.
What a horse race it is. TIZNOW, Captain Steve. TIZNOW gonna win it. TIZNOW a neck to Captain Steve.
TIZNOW had kind of like to win by just a little, and that might have been one of those times. Or Captain Steve might have been just really good that day too, but it was a heck of a race.
Welcome back to Churchill Downs in Louisville, Kentucky. One of the more recent arrivals, though, TIZNOW turned some heads out on the track with his gallop.
When he galloped, it was, for a lot of horses, it was like the work. He put a lot into his gallop.
Where do you see this horse in the post-parade when it comes time to get this horse out in front of the crowd? He is amazing.
He continued to do well. He was just anxious.
TIZNOW was considered a contender, but the spotlight belonged to Kentucky Derby winner Fusaichi Pegasus.
Here's the finish. Fusaichi Pegasus wins it by a length and a half.
Hall of Fame trainer Neil Drysdale had been down this road before. In 1992, he had the pressure of settling the favorite in the classic, AP Indy.
One last run at him. AP Indy wins.
The field also included the likes of Nick Zito and Albert the Great. D. Wayne Lucas had the defending classic champion Cappy, Belmont Stakes champion Lemon Drop Kid, plus TIZNOW would have to face Captain Steve again. But the horse everyone wondered about hailed from Europe. The media would wait each morning for Giant's Causeway to appear from the quarantine barn for his morning exercise. World-renowned trainer Aidan O'Brien had guided this prize colt to 6 Group 1 races. However, it never raced on dirt.
Giant's Causeway concerned me.
I'd called a European trainer friend of mine. He says if he gets in front of you, you won't beat him. I said, that right? He goes, yeah, he just won't let anybody get past him.
If TIZNOW were to win the Classic, he'd have to run the race of his life. Jay Robbins took out his trainer's license in 1976. 24 years later, TIZNOW would give him his first shot at winning the Breeders' Cup. Robbins knew that this was his shot at the big time, but even more so for TIZNOW's owner and breeder, Cecilia Straub Rubens, who made the trip despite being sick.
She was tired from I thought it was more from traveling than illness.
Essentially stayed in her room except to go to the races.
My mother had this incredible attitude that's, you know, very positive. Of course we're going to win.
And they're off. Oh, here comes TIZNOW from the far outside.
He broke well, and he settled into that rhythmic stride.
As the field rounds the far turn, Albert the Great and TIZNOW, they continue to go at it. Giant's Causeway is called on for his run.
As the race progressed, I thought he had quite a bit of horse left.
Fusaichi Pegasus is toiling. TIZNOW on the outside. Albert the Great on the rail. The two of them continue to go at it. Here comes Giant's Causeway for Ireland on the outside.
When you saw Giant's Causeway coming, yeah, I thought it was going to be tough. But I also thought that he could be equal to the task.
They're coming into the final furlong. TIZNOW tough as nails.
Oh, everyone's so excited in the box, and she's jumping up and down. You're always like, where is that finish line? It just seems like it's forever down that stretch.
Giant's Causeway and TIZNOW battling head-to-head. A heart-pounding, pulsating stretch drive, and TIZNOW prevails.
2 of the world's greatest horses, right at the top of their game, just battling out. It was incredible. It was truly incredible.
TIZNOW was so full of energy after the race at Churchill Downs that day. If we went another time around, nobody was going to catch us.
TIZNOW has won it by a nose.
I pumped my fist into the air a couple of times.
I never remember going to the winner's circle. It's just like magic.
I'm asking Jim Pegram how to get down to the winner's circle because I'd forgotten.
Robin's emotions hit him the hardest when he saw Cecilia's glowing face in the winner's circle.
But I really wanted to see him win for her. It was the biggest moment of her life in the thoroughbred industry, without a doubt.
She bred and raised the colts. I couldn't help but think that this kind of a victory would certainly make her feel terrific inside.
A thrill for me, but it was even a bigger thrill for me that C got to have this happen.
It was a big day for her. I mean, she had just seen her baby win the Breeders' Cup.
I thought it was a fitting end for that, not knowing she'd die 3 days later.
I knew she was scheduled for surgery. She hadn't shared with us that they had thought it was cancerous.
I talked to her the night before, and she didn't seem to be too concerned.
When everything started going wrong, I called Mike, and Mike was there before they came back and said that she'd passed away.
That was kind of a shock.
The public wondered if Horse of the Year TIZNOW would come back and race at age 4.
Obviously, there's a lot going on because my mom had just passed, and But as soon as the Breeders' Cup was over, Mike had had a lot of calls concerning that.
Well, he was never any doubt he was race at age 4. You know, he only had 8 races, I think, by the time the Breeders' Cup was over.
I think at that point, Mike realized that, you know, it was like a gift from my mom.
He had a lot of racing left in him.
I'm sure they all had it in their mind that they would certainly love to give him the opportunity to defend his title. But it wasn't as smooth a road in his 4-year-old season as it was in his 3-year-old season.
TIZNOW would try to become the first horse in history to win a second Breeders' Cup Classic. Many racing greats have tried, but all had failed to do so. But before Team TIZNOW could even start to worry about defending his title in the Classic, they had to get their prize colt back in top form.
When he came back from Louisville after the Breeders' Cup, he looked like a spent horse at that time. Physically, you could see it really shrunk him up. He almost looked like he did in the fall of his 2-year-old year. And it took a while for him to come back to himself physically.
But by that time, Robbins had another issue to deal with.
He was fighting quarter cracks at that time too, for which he had patches.
Despite the feet problems, TIZNOW won 2 of his first 3 races at Santa Anita.
After the big cap, we were just looking at him. Who wants this, you know?
I breezed him one morning a mile in preparation for the Pimlico Special, and about 20 minutes into his cool-out period, he started walking really short behind, and it appeared to us that he was tying up. He had injured something up in his back.
Mike did call me on that and said that we're really questioning whether we're going to be able to keep going forward with him.
We wouldn't run him unless he was 100%.
It became nip and tuck whether to run him again or just retire him.
On September 8th of 2001, TIZNOW was sent to Belmont Park to race in the Grade 1 Woodward Stakes. It would be his first race in 6 months.
And they're off, and TIZNOW got off to a good start.
He was laying very close to the pace, and I thought I had dead aim on the leaders when I got to the 5/16 pole, but he didn't kick on like he had in his 3-year-old season.
Albert the Great in front, huge opening for TIZNOW, and Chris McCarron is asking TIZNOW for everything he has. TIZNOW not today, down to the finish. Lido Palace surges to win the Woodward.
TIZNOW does flatten out just a tad, maybe gets a bit tired off that long layoff after overcoming so many physical setbacks.
It was a disappointment, but you can't win them all.
I wasn't that disappointed with the Woodward. Other people were. So we decided to bring him back to California for the Goodwood again.
But TIZNOW's return to California would be delayed due to the following Tuesday's events that would alter the world.
It almost goes without saying, but we'll say it anyway. This is not going to be a normal broadcast day at TVG.
I was on the golf course.
I was walking down the road from my barn by Mike Smith's barn, and he had a TV on.
Judy called me on my cell phone and said, a plane just crashed into the World Trade Center. She said, you better get home. I said, get home? What am I going to do?
The first plane had hit, and I said, God, what pilot error. You know, it never occurred to me that it was an active tear.
20 minutes later, she calls me again and she says, we're being attacked. A second plane flew into the other tower, and I would really appreciate it if you just pick up the ball and come on home, which I did.
Who knew what any of us were thinking at that time? I wasn't thinking about TIZNOW, but I was more worried about the country, you know, and people in the Towers and the Pentagon and wherever else was going to happen. That was a very, very strange day.
Reaction coming in throughout the thoroughbred industry.
Due to the events of the day, England has decided the most appropriate course of action is to cancel today's sale.
This has touched every corner of America.
I wasn't too sure what was going to happen after 9/11. I was scheduled to ride a bunch of horses in at Belmont the weekend after that, and but they canceled the races, of course. We were just concerned that they may not hold the Breeders' Cup that year.
But the Breeders' Cup would go on as scheduled at Belmont Park in the shadows of Manhattan. 11 days after the attacks, TIZNOW would return home to Santa Anita with a chance to prove himself in his final tune-up for the Classic.
When I turned for home in the Goodwood, I thought I had dead aim on the leaders again, like in the Woodward. But he didn't kick on like he normally does.
Freedom Crest by a length, skipping second, TIZNOW third.
Now, I was disappointed in the Goodwood, and yet I'd watch him, he galloped out in front of us like he was just bored.
Unfortunately, the questions would only amplify and become more complex. Robbins was becoming part trainer, part psychiatrist to his reigning Horse of the Year. Even McCarron expanded his role beyond just being TIZNOW's jockey.
Right before the work, I tried to give him a pep talk. I even showed him his picture on the cover of this year's Breeders' Cup magazine, and I said, "Look, you big dummy, this is you. Get out there and do this again."
Robbins had no idea what was in store for him that autumn morning.
On Wednesday morning, the weather was temperamental during workouts at Santa Anita. On Thursday, the horses were.
As for the continuing soap opera that revolves around TIZNOW, Wednesday's scheduled 7-furlong work started with a couple of changes.
Well, I let him stand there for 3 or 4 minutes, and I wanted to be able to get and breeze him on a real fresh track because it's right after the break. So I was encouraging him to go forward. He wasn't having it. So I backed him up a little further.
When the defending champ stepped on the track at 9:30, his connections were ready for his all-important workout. But unfortunately, TIZNOW said, "Not now," and refused to work.
You saw what happened. He starts out, then he balks, then he starts again, then he balks. And this has been an ongoing thing.
The more forceful I got with him, the more resentful he became. So I just wait till he's ready to go again. Now I'm at the 6.5, and I got my feet out of the stirrups, chirping to him, squeezing with my legs, kicking, slapping him on the neck with the rein. And every time I did anything, his ears just went back like this, and he raised his head. He goes, "Nope, I ain't going." Now my mind's racing. I'm out there for like 20 minutes now, at least. He wasn't going to ship until Monday morning. We still have tomorrow morning to come back and breeze him if he doesn't go today. And I took him over to the starting gate, tried to fit him with some blinkers, and he didn't want to go with the blinkers on, so we took them back off.
It's been said nothing attracts a crowd like a crowd. Well, during the Thursday morning workouts, nothing attracted a crowd like TIZNOW. As a matter of fact, Jay Robbins, while he was anxiously awaiting for his horse to work, had to deal with a number of people who came down to the track apron to see if indeed TIZNOW would finally work.
And then just out of the blue, I got my feet out of the stirrups, out of the blue. He starts walking, and he went into a trot right away. So now I have to hustle and get my feet back in the pedals. And when I got my feet back in the stirrups, he starts galloping. Now I'm at the 5.5, and I'm trying to hold him, and I'm saying, there's no way I'm going to get this horse to the wire. No way. Because I can't pull him up after he's run 1.25 miles. How am I going to pull him up in just a gallop or slow him down? I said, well, here I am at the 4.5. Guess what, pal? I'm going to breeze from the half mile back to the half. I always clocked horses with my own watch. So I get 3 strides before the pole, put my finger on the start button, flip. So I'm going along like this, and he's flying. I hit the split at the quarter pole. I look at my watch, and I think, if I'm correct, I think it said 46-2. I'm going, oh, geez, I'm going too fast. And when I got around the middle of the turn, his ears went up, and he started looking at the gap. And I'm thinking, no, you're not thinking about going home yet. Don't do this going 40 miles an hour.
Now, we've made a lot of him balking before the work starts, but Frank, once this work starts, you can see right here, he starts to knuckle over on the horse, ask him for just a little bit more, and he gets a good response.
What an incredible stride this horse has. He's a big, tall, imposing looking individual, and he can really run. This horse is he's fit and ready, and it's just getting over his frustrating antics.
Doesn't have to run any faster than that in the Breeders' Cup, as long as he keeps on going to the 1.25 miles. But he'll have to answer that question for us.
And finally, when TIZNOW crossed the finish line, he got a hearty pat on the back, something he hopes to get October 27th after the Classic.
You know, he was mad about something. He was just telling us. And then he worked. Awesome. I mean, Baffert was standing next to me after the work. He said, that was the most incredible work I've ever seen, and not the part where he goofed off for 45 minutes. The actual minute and 35 seconds he went around that racetrack was just off the charts. But you know, mentally he was a total mystery to everybody by then.
Journalists from around the world converged at Belmont Park for the Breeders' Cup. The media watched Prix de l'Arc de Triomphe champion Saki's every move and monitored trainer Saeed bin Surur's every word. That is until TIZNOW arrived. Strong gusty winds were less than ideal for TIZNOW's first day over the Big Sandy.
Add to the pot a little propping and wheeling and avoiding the pony like it was too much paprika.
He was a little tougher than usual today, maybe because he's been off for a couple of days.
Safely off the track, sort of, TIZNOW kicks at his pony. Robbins orders another round of Belmont. This time the pony is replaced by an outrider.
I feel sorry for Jay Robbins because it's not an easy thing. There's nothing you can do at this stage to turn this horse around.
And TIZNOW, post 10. Chris McCarron, 5-1.
After the draw, TIZNOW started to settle in.
This is a horse that has a tremendous amount of ability. I think he's coming up to his best race. You got the defending champion, you got a great horseman in Jay Robbins, you got one of the greatest riders of all time in Chris McCarron.
Robbins was finally seeing shades of TIZNOW's old championship form, and it couldn't have come at a better time.
I wasn't as comfortable as I'd been the year before where he was, but became very comfortable after he'd spent a couple of days on the track at Belmont. It was like he had a new lease on life.
TIZNOW was just a day away from attempting to make Breeders' Cup history. 6 weeks after 9/11, Breeders' Cup Day had arrived. It was New York's first international sporting event since the terrorist attacks.
It was eerie. I was astonished when I walked with all the other jockeys across the track, out on the turf course, and we turn and we look up on top of the building, and there was a rifleman, there was a sniper, about, I don't know, every 100 feet, the whole length of the grandstand.
It was so unusual. I mean, to go there and see something that wasn't the norm, all the security.
It was just a tremendous sense of patriotism, felt by everybody.
Everything was so patriotic, and you wanted everything to heal so rapidly, and you wanted everything so positive.
Usually in days like that, it's competitor feeling, one against the other, but the overall sense, the overall feeling that we were pretty much all brothers.
I wasn't really nervous for this race. I think I was more nervous at Churchill. It was like he'd done what he needed to do as far as proving himself, I felt, in his first Breeders' Cup win.
Yeah, I was nervous. I did a lot of pacing. I went through a lot of cigarettes in front of his stall.
I thought Galileo was going to be the really tough horse in the race. I really wasn't that worried about the American horses.
I don't think people expected him to run that well, given his recent form.
To be honest with you, I probably didn't have as much respect as I should have for TIZNOW. He was a bit of an unappreciated horse, I think, for how good he was.
He was great going over the paddock, and he did something I'd never seen him do before. Security guard walking behind him got pretty close, and he kicked as hard as I've ever seen him kick and just missed the guy.
He didn't want people behind him.
I said, I think he's okay now. I was pretty optimistic, given the way he had trained that week back there. Chris was too, I think.
Oh, he looked awesome. He blossomed. There's no question about it.
I told Jay in the paddock that I was just going to have it in my head that I wasn't going to hit him with the stick, simply because if he's going ahead and running well, I wanted him to do it. I did have some concern about which TIZNOW was going to show up. So I warmed him up. We got our warm-up complete. He was moving beautifully, on the muscle.
On a big race, there's nobody you want more than Chris McCarron. At that time in his career, he might have not been the most physically gifted rider, but he is really smart.
I did go to Bobby Duncan, the head starter at Belmont that day, and asked him if he would send one of his assistants down the track and just go ahead and put a shank on him. And he walked right up there, and we got there ahead of everybody. And he just stood there kindly, and he just cocked his hind leg, which is a great body language indication that he's relaxed.
The crowd was so behind him. You know, they wanted the American horse.
He walked into the gate on time.
Ready for the start of the Classic. And they're off! To the cheers of the crowd, Albert the Great is gun to the lead. But Pat Day and Orientate are going to take the fight to him. And those two hook up in a speed duel in the first furlong here. TIZNOW not far behind. He's running third in the early going.
He broke alertly and placed himself in the race where he needed to be.
Galileo, only 5 lengths from the lead, he's fifth. The ARC winner, Saki, is sixth on the outside.
And I thought the ARC would knock enough out of Saki that he wouldn't be that big of a factor. What he tried to do is incredible to win the ARC and the Classic.
The quarter went in 23 1/5 seconds, a grueling pace here. Albert the Great grinding it out on a short lead now. And on the outside, the daunting presence of a horse of the year, TIZNOW, and he's right there just off the pace for it. Saki and Galileo right there and behind the lead.
He didn't accelerate when I first asked him to accelerate at the quarter pole.
And the field turns for home. Here comes the ARC winner, Saki, and he storms to the lead.
It was only until Saki passed us on the outside that TIZNOW decided to go ahead and just turn on the afterburners.
And TIZNOW is doubling on.
When he changes leads, he dives over to the at his head, his stride lengthens.
Oh, I went ahead and I tapped him once left-handed. Son of a gun, he took off.
The American Horse of the Year, New York winner, heads apart with a fair nibble in the Classic.
Saki was still flying.
I thought, oh, we're going to run third.
On the outside, Saki.
And then, you know, same old mystery horse. All of a sudden he says, no way. Bam. He goes between those two, and then I just quit breathing.
I felt the acceleration. When I reached back and I tapped him on his left side, his head dropped a little bit, and I literally felt the acceleration, and my confidence swelled.
TIZNOW fights on!
And I just started screaming, ah! Ah! Ah!
Here's the winner!
I got goosebumps right now, remembering the feeling that I got. And it was just exhilarating.
And TIZNOW is battling on! The American Horse of the Year! And the Ox winner are heads apart with a fair nibble in the Classic. On the outside, Saki. TIZNOW fights on! Here's the winner! Desperately close! TIZNOW wins it for America!
When I stood up and I heard Tom Durkin yell, TIZNOW wins it for America! It was just awesome. It was awesome.
Couldn't have gotten any better than that.
It was unbelievable. Still gives me goosebumps.
You just knew that he had the heart to do it. He just wanted to fight that horse.
That sent chills down my spine.
It's always been a mystery what makes a champion horse, and it's just a mystery. I have no idea why he did it. I'm just blessed that I was part of it.
At least I think I know what it feels like to be standing on the podium, to have that gold medal placed around your neck with the national anthem playing behind you. There was that much international flavor on that day in light of all the circumstances.